Hi everyone, Teddy Baldassarre with TeddyBaldassarre.com. In this video, we're going to be looking at a new watch from Rado with the Rado Captain Cook High-Tech Ceramic. So in this video, we'll take a closer look at the watches here, also jump into some things to consider before purchasing. If you are interested in buying these watches, link in the description down below to TeddyBaldassarre.com, full authorized dealer of Rado timepieces, as well as a place where you can book a time with a dedicated watch specialist if you have any questions as well on the website. So definitely don't be shy there. But guys, let's jump into the video, take a closer look at these new watches. So if you are a regular viewer of this channel, you're probably familiar with the Rado Captain Cook models, as we've covered quite a few different configurations available from the collection. We've had our chance to look at the higher end bronze models, the high-tech ceramic, as well as some of the traditional tribute versions as well. But today we're looking at my favorite variation, one that I actually own, with this gray dial variant and gray bezel. As far as vintage inspired dive watches go within the Captain Cook collection, this particular variation I think really does capture the original 1960s aesthetic while doing so with a few contemporary touches. As for Rado, the brand was founded in Switzerland in 1917, originally founded under a different brand name, under Schlepp & Co. The company scaled up to one of the largest movement manufacturers during World War II, and by the 1950s was renamed to Rado, where they expanded across the globe and introduced watches such as the Baldassarre. Today, the brand is owned by the Swatch Group, and I would say is one of the more underrated watch brands out there, at least in the US market, very well known across the globe, producing interesting avant-garde timepieces, specializing in the use of non-traditional materials for case manufacturing, which helps them stand out in a very competitive price category. Now, taking a look at this watch on the wrist, we have a fully brushed 42mm case with a lug-to-lug length of 48.3 millimeters and a thin case at just 12.1 millimeters, with some of that real estate being made up at that dome sapphire crystal. Looking at the Rado Captain Cook, it's important to note that there are two primary case sizes. You have this 42mm option and the 37mm option. Quite a bit of separation here when trying to make a decision. Now, when it comes to both of the watches, I would say they wear at least a millimeter or 2 millimeters smaller than what the size would indicate. So for this 42mm variant, I would say wears closer to that of a 40.5mm case or 41mm case. And when it comes to the 37mm option, closer to that of a 36mm case, if not smaller, because of the broken up part of the case architecture with that rotating bezel along the outside. The 37mm is going to be small, so just keep that in mind if you're going to go in that direction. But I'm probably right in the middle of where the cutoff would be, but it all comes down to your general just expectations and preferences here. The case construction overall is very well done. It feels substantial and wears very thin to the wrist. That cannot be overlooked enough. This is a thin dive watch for getting 200 meters of water resistance out of it, so that is definitely a strong point in going in this direction, and the perks of being able to get some of these modified ETA calibers that the Swatch Group gets their hands on. Between the lugs on this watch, we do have a 21mm lug width, which is one of the downsides of this variation, odd number lug width. This particular version though comes with 3 different strap options. So you have the beads of rice bracelet, you also have a leather strap option and a NATO strap as well. The leather strap comes with a deployant buckle. The NATO strap comes in gray with matching hardware to the case. But in terms of the most popular of those 3, and probably the most fitting for this watch, that beads of rice bracelet. The bracelet comes with brushed outer links and high polished inner links that give the bracelet its endearing style. It is also finished off with a 2-button fold over clasp with a Rado logo embossed on top. There's also a textured striping that runs the length of the clasp surface. Also, there are quite a few different sizing links to the bracelet to secure with push pins. So sizing to the wrist shouldn't be a problem, but there is the lack of micro adjustment in the clasp. So that is one point of consideration here and one downside of the bracelet, because otherwise it is a very good beads of rice style and probably one of the best in the price category. But it is a bit frustrating to see that there's no micro adjustment, because when you look at the clasp, there is certainly room for it. The leather strap as well as the bracelet comes with a quick release system as well, so that will assist in allowing you to swap in and out different straps. Looking closer at the case, as mentioned before, you'll find brush finishing on top of all the surfaces, with only exceptions being the crown and the sides of the bezel, which are the only high polished areas of the case. The crown on this particular model is narrow but tall at 5.3 millimeters. It is of the screw down variety, aiding in that 200 meters of water resistance, and the crown operates just as you would expect. Unscrew it to the first position, you have hand wind winding, pull the crown to the second position, you can adjust the date, and to fully extend it out, you then can set the time while getting a hacking second feature, so stopping the second hand in the process to set that precise time. The bezel is a very solid 120 click unidirectional bezel with a coin edge, giving a very nice tactile feel when operating, and there's almost no play when actively rotating. The bezel insert is a high grade dark gray ceramic to match the dial, and if you know Rado at all, you know that they are masters of using non-traditional materials in their cases, particularly ceramic, so its use in the Captain Cook lineup makes a ton of sense. It's a hard material that is lightweight, highly resistant to wear and scratches, so in addition to looking good, it also provides actual everyday benefits. This dome crystal and slanted bezel is probably one of the main parts of its aesthetic that's leaning into this mid 20th century design, and it really does look the part. The gray bezel and dial can change a bit to a black in certain lighting conditions, but when looking at it with the naked eye under good light, it is going to look gray, and I think that allows it to separate from many other watches in the price category, because if you're going for a gray dive watch, that is not something that comes out quite often, and there's so many people that go for that kind of ghosted look. That's a huge draw for me when looking at this timepiece and allowing it to separate from others in the market. Sitting beneath the crystal is the domed dark matte gray dial with large white luminous hour markers. These hour markers take up a good amount of real estate on the dial, providing excellent legibility and contrast. Along the outside of the dial is an angled silver rehaut with minute track markings. The combination of the bezel and the inner marking track provide a bit of a visual scaling to the dial, which is one of the reasons the watch looks and feels a little bit closer to that of a 40mm size than the listed 42mm by the brand. The Rado logo is printed under the pivoting anchor at the 12 o'clock position, which bounces around at different positions as you move on your wrist, and the printing of Captain Cook is at the 6 o'clock position in white. The large hands at the center come in a matte white finish containing superluminova, and the superluminova within the hands is very good. Within the markers, the incandescence is a little bit behind that of the handset, but should provide good visibility. One other point when it comes to lume, there is no looming in the bezel, so in terms of being a ISO 6425 standard type of dive watch, it's not going to be that, so that is another point of consideration here when looking at the Captain Cook. But in terms of the overall design of the bezel, the dome crystal, the effect and the illusion of the doming of the actual dial slightly, and the color gray being very different from the rest of the marketplace, this is certainly one that's going to stand out, I think, even from the rest of the Captain Cooks as well, while also holding true to the tradition of this line, certainly looking back to the 1960s throughout. Flipping over the Captain Cook here, we have a screw-down case back being decorated with an embossed array of seahorses, but within this watch here, we have the C07 movement inside, a ETA modified movement from the Swatch Group that allows a impressive power reserve of 80 hours in this movement. So taking the 38-hour power reserve base and then jumping this one up to 80 hours. How they're able to do this is by reducing the beat frequency from 28,800 vibrations per hour and then taking that down to 21,600 vibrations per hour, or 3 hertz. These movements are reliable, you're getting that lengthy power reserve, and these stack up well in a price range for dive watches where many are going to be housing Sellita and ETA calibers without this type of modification. So again, just a high-level overview, 21,600 vibrations per hour or 3 hertz, features hacking and hand winding, so hacking stopping the second hand when you pull out the crown to the farthest position, and again, that 80-hour power reserve. These are all laser regulated in the factory, and anecdotal evidence usually seeing these running in the single digits per day. Now to unpack and to line up who is this Rado Captain Cook for, this particular variant especially. Now the Rado Captain Cook, in terms of where it is sitting in the marketplace compared to some other dive watches, this isn't going to be the one that is going to lean into diver heritage and be a dive watch that you're going to want to maybe push to the limit. It's not ISO 6425 compliant, so that lack of lume in the bezel, the bracelet kind of leaning into that vintage heritage design. You also, again, aren't going to get the micro adjustment in the clasp as that one downside there as well. But what this Rado Captain Cook is a design for dive watch that just simply looks fantastic and really does lean into that mid 20th century design from models of the era. The first Captain Cook was released in 1962, and if you had to pick one that probably is in alignment with that design and maybe giving you an idea of what one would look like if it aged kind of gracefully here, this would be the one. I think the gray bezel, the gray color dial is so different compared to what you're going to find from other dive watches on the market. You always hear about ghosted bezels all the time, and this allows you to get that type of look in a more contemporary package. You're getting a dome sapphire crystal, high-tech ceramic bezel with good bezel action, a thin dive watch at just over 12 millimeters, and also getting a reliable movement within with an 80-hour power reserve. The Rado Captain Cook is probably one of the most underrated dive watches, I think, in the category. Sure, it's not going to have all the bells and whistles of maybe a dive watch you're going to push to the limits, say going saturation diving and things of that sort, but if you are somebody that likes the idea of heritage design and vintage watches, but wants some modern, maybe more avant-garde appeal, that is what the Rado Captain Cook truly represents. All right, guys, well, thank you again so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. If you're also interested in purchasing this watch, link in the description to TeddyBaldassarre.com, full authorized dealer of all the brands that we carry. Also, if you have any further questions that were not answered in this video, please do not hesitate to book a time with one of our watch specialists on our website. But guys, thank you guys so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.